Greetings and welcome to Origins of the Templars. I made this video after seeing Scott Onstott's In Plain Sight, and it takes up his request that others look into the questions he raises.
My focus is on how the Templars originated.
But first I want to offer my 2 cents worth as to why these secrets are in plain view.
First, it could be all about energy. If Scott is right, and the cosmos consists of fractal vortices by which the microcosm is linked geometrically to the macrocosm, then the alignments and monuments created by Freemasonry could be a grid which the Illuminati can plug into. Secondly, it could just be power. And hey, if you got it, flaunt it. As what is the point of having power if nobody knows about it? And real power is the power to be absurd. And what is more absurd than building a box in the middle of Paris that's big enough to put Notre Dame inside of?
Notre Dame takes us back to the Templars, as Jacques de Molay, last Grand Master of the Order, asked to be turned towards it as he was roasted alive. De Molay and his right-hand man de Charnay were actually in the process of being sentenced to life imprisonment when they renounced their confessions, basically giving the finger to King Philip. It was for this reason they were roasted.
And what was de Molay saying to King Philip about Notre Dame? Surely it's too late, baby. It's too late. But that's the end of the Templars, and another story. What is said about the origins of the Templars is that between 1114 and 1116, the founder of the order, Hugh de Payens, a French nobleman from Champagne, accompanied Count Hugh of Champagne on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and visited Jerusalem. Around 1119, de Payens founded the Order of the Knights Templar, giving it the name Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The original order consisted of de Payens and 8 knights, 2 of whom were brothers, and all of whom were his close relatives by either blood or marriage. De Payens most likely obtained approval for the order from King Baldwin II of Jerusalem and Warmund, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, at the Council of Nablus in 1120, and the order was given a base on the Temple Mount. There is a theory, to my knowledge first propagated in the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, that the Templars spent 10 years on the Temple Mount and are said to have uncovered esoteric knowledge there. Now, the above dates are approximate, but if correct, then it appears that the order takes the appellation of Templars right at the start, which does not fit with the name being derived from something special about the Temple Mount, as this could not have been discovered until later. Scott is of the opinion that rather than some esoteric object, such as the Holy Hand Grenade, it was knowledge that was found. Scott is right to doubt an object was found on the Temple Mount, as it was highly improbable that A. the Romans didn't take everything of value when they threw the Jews out of Palestine, B. the Jews didn't take everything of value when they were thrown out of Palestine, and C. that in the interceding 1,000 years some fossicker hadn't found anything that was left. Scott's idea that knowledge was what the Templars found is superficially attractive, but it appears to be based on what the Templars later did, and so is backwards reasoning, which rests on the assumption that the Templars were either seeking such knowledge or at least receptive to it. This is a very big assumption when one recalls that the Templars were monkish crusaders, that is, fundamentalist militant Christian jihadi who sought martyrdom by death in battle with the usurpers of the Holy Land, and so similar to the fundamentalist and militant Christians who had previously destroyed the great library at Alexandria, burning the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. It seems to me that a closer look at the origins of the Templars is called for, but the closer one looks at the Templars, the more confusing the picture becomes. The mission that the Templars were supposedly founded for was the protection of pilgrims who were at risk of plunder and even death in their journey from the coast of Palestine to Jerusalem. But what the Templars actually did was form an elite heavy cavalry, populated by martyrdom-seeking monks, which was used as the strike force of the Crusaders. This may be an early example of mission creep, but equally, the creation of the strike force could have always been their intention, and the protecting pilgrims propaganda was just a cell to cover the actual mission, as there was controversy over the founding of the Templars order, many churchmen taking exception to Christian monks being engaged in warfare. After all, the first commandment is, "Thou shalt not kill." While ostensibly the Templars were all men ready to sacrifice themselves to God, it is instructive to recount the Templars' Latin rule, 57. This kind of New World Order, we believe, was born out of the Holy Scriptures and divine providence in the Holy Land of the Fast. That is to say, that this armed company of knights may kill the enemies of the cross without sinning. For this reason, we judge you to be rightly called Knights of the Temple, with the double merit and beauty of probity, and that you may have lands, and keep men, villeins, and fields, and govern them justly, and take your right to them as it is specifically established. So what was really going on? Poor knights protecting pilgrims, monks seeking martyrdom, or settler soldiers carving out some real estate?
Talking about secrets in plain sight, perhaps the oddest thing about the Templars is their dedication to the Temple of Solomon itself. Again, it must be remembered that the Templars were supposedly frontline Christian crusaders, so it is more than a little strange that they adopted a name with such Jewish connotations. As for medieval crusading Christians, these were the people who had killed Christ. When the Crusades were first mooted and support raised for them, many crusaders did not see the point in travelling all the way to the Middle East to kill unbelievers, and happily went about massacring their local Jewish communities. This slaughter was so extensive that it is known as the First Holocaust. The bloodletting was topped off when the Crusaders took Jerusalem, where along with the Muslims they butchered the city's Jewish inhabitants. So why would a militant crusading order then take a name so redolent of Judaism?
So why would a bunch of bobber boys take up an interest in the esoteric? It would be more likely that a troop of Taliban suicide bombers would find a book of Wordsworth sonnets in a GI mess and decide to set up a romantic poetry appreciation society. This presents a problem, as clearly the Templars did introduce esoteric knowledge into the West. Perhaps the solving of this puzzle lies in the fact that only 1 in 10 Templars were crusading knights, the vast majority being involved in business. No precise numbers exist, but it is estimated in Wikipedia that at the order's peak there were between 15 and 20,000 Templars, of whom about a tenth were actual knights, and it is said that the others were acting in support positions to assist the knights and to manage the financial infrastructure. A moment's reflection tells you that it does not take that ratio to support medieval cavalry, and that the great preponderance of the Templars were involved in something else. This infrastructure consisted of financial networks across the whole of Christendom, large tracts of land, both in Europe and the Middle East. They brought and managed farms and vineyards. They built churches and castles. They were involved in manufacturing, import and export. They had their own fleet of ships, and at one point, they even owned the entire island of Cyprus. It is said that the Order of the Knights Templar arguably qualifies as the world's first multinational corporation. Such dedication to worldly wealth is completely at odds with the Templars' emblem, which was 2 knights on a single horse, which is a pledge of renunciation. In a grossly materialistic age such as ours, it is difficult to grasp that for a medieval Christian knight, poverty was a religious statement. It was rejection of the dominion of things and dedication to the spiritual life of God. So what are the Templars doing? Running a corporation, which, as it is said, has no body to kick or soul to damn. For the Templars to have become the ideological opposite in such a short time is unlikely. And I think they were a sham from the outset, or more correctly, they were a cover for something else. The story goes that the order was founded by Eudipayans and 8 other equally obscure knights. This is not how things worked in feudal France during the Dark Ages. This was a static, hierarchical society where there were only 2 poles of power, the Church and the Lords. Eudipayans' first visit to Jerusalem was in the entourage of the Count of Champagne. This and the fact that the 3rd Grand Master was the King of France's treasurer demonstrates that the order was sponsored by powerful princes. Eudipayans and the successive Grand Masters were simply functionaries and safe pairs of hands. While such patronage accounts for the order's establishment, it does not account for its phenomenal business success that is so meteoric it can only be accounted for by access to capital and business acumen. At the centre of the Templars' business empire was their letters of credit, which was a banking system. This banking system was directly derived from the Radhanites, highly successful Jewish traders from the French Rhone Valley, who used this system throughout the Mediterranean. The Radhanites gained their preeminent position as traders from the clash of Islam and Christianity, in which they could operate as go-betweens. This enabled them to dominate the spice trade, mercantile capitalism's first major commodity. In Ibn's Khordadbeh's Book of Roads and Kingdoms, circa 870, he described the Radhanites as follows. These merchants speak Arabic, Persian, Roman, the Frank, Spanish, and Slav languages. They travelled from west to east, from east to west, partly on land, partly by sea. They transport from the west eunuchs, female slaves, boys, brocade, castor, marten and other furs, and swords. They take ship from France and travel via the Suez or Antioch and the Euphrates to the Red Sea. The strange thing about these mighty merchants is that they are said to have disappeared at almost precisely the same time as the Templars came on the scene. But I am not a great believer in magic disappearing tricks. By the time of the Templars, the high watermark of Islam's encroachment on Europe had come and gone. More importantly, the Mongols had stopped Islam's march north and then hammered the Muslim heartland. Although the Muslims had finally contained the Mongols, it was at a terrible price. It would make sense in a period in which Christianity was gaining the upper hand for the Radhanites to make a strategic shift and align themselves with the Christians. Also, it could not have been lost on the Jews that a way back to the Promised Land was in the offing. There is also the factor that the massacre of Jewish communities in the build-up to the Crusades would have brought home the vulnerability of the Radhanites. So the adoption of an explicitly Judaic title by a crusading order functioned as a validation of Judaism. I think the reason the Radhanites' involvement in the Templars was kept a secret was because the Radhanites wished to preserve their go-between status with the Muslim world should the Crusades fail. A close inspection of the Templars' Rule 57 reveals that they were not a Christian order at all, but ardent partisans of the Old Testament. This kind of new order, we believe, was born out of the Holy Scriptures. The function of the Templars was the conquest of Palestine. There is nothing in the New Testament scriptures which ordain the conquest of Palestine, but plenty in the Old Testament. So the Holy Scriptures are the old ones. And divine providence. Providence is fate. Christ conquered fate by rising from the dead. Providence is an old religion concept which says that the successful are God's chosen. In the Holy Land of the fast. To fast is to sacrifice. Sacrifice is not part of Christ's message. Sacrifice is a trade with the gods found in all primitive religions. That is to say, that this armed company of knights may kill the enemies of the cross without sinning. Jesus gave his life on the cross and preached turning the other cheek and forgiveness. So this is not Christianity. This is Old Testament ideology. For this reason, we judge you to be rightly called Knights of the Temple. Notice here that the poor fellow soldiers of Christ appellation is dispensed with, and only the Judaic connection with the Temple of Solomon remains. And that you may have lands and keep men, billions and fields. This is the payoff. The Templars get to be the overlords of Palestine and enslave the surviving Muslims. In conclusion, it is inconceivable that the Templars could have stumbled over something on the Temple Mount which aroused their curiosity, as there was nothing left to stumble over. If there was something to discover, this must have been known or suspected from the outset, which again questions who set up the Templars. It is similarly inconceivable that a group of Christian crusaders explicitly dedicated to poverty would have immediately gone about setting up a banking empire. This does present a problem, as returning to Scott's work, it is clear that the Templars did introduce esoteric knowledge into the West, and the question arises as to why, when the Templars were either a frontline strike force or a business empire in the making.
I think that the answer to this lies in the fact that beyond being a banking corporation and an organisation of settler soldiers, the Templars were primarily a political organisation, making alliances and carving out turf. Looked at this way, esoteric knowledge, beyond being a commodity the Radhanites could sell for a profit, places the Templars at the dawn of the Enlightenment as the bringers of light, a political investment that paid in spades as time went on. Similarly, the promotion of the cult of the Virgin Mary provided allies in an Earthstar's Christianity no longer centred on Jesus Christ, a person that the Jewish establishment never had much time for.
Scott traces the Templars to the City of London Banking Corporation, which shares the Templars' use of St. George's Cross. Another banking organisation, which also used the Cross of St. George as its flag, was the Genoan Bank of San Giorgio, which again was involved with the Radhanites. Prior to 958, the patron saint of Genoa was St. Lawrence, but the Genoese transferred their allegiance to St. George at some point during the 11th or 12th century, and Genoa had a banner displaying a red cross on a white field since at least 1218, possibly as early as 1113. So contemporaneously, both the Templars and San Giorgio adopted the St. George's Cross. Now that's a coincidence. Genoa is situated in northwestern Italy, not far from the mouth of the Rhone, which was the base of the Radhanites. It had been an old Roman port, and in 1773 it was annexed by the Frankish Carolingian Empire, but for the following several centuries, Genoa was little more than a small fishing port, which was sacked and burned in 934 by North African pirates and likely abandoned for a few years. Yet by 1100, the Republic of Genoa was a regional power, this transformation being largely credited to shipbuilding and banking. In general, the Republic was run much as a business affair, and it is often difficult to determine where the bank's influence ended and the Republic's began. Governance of the bank was divided between leading Genoan families and Radhanites, including the Gisolfi clan that managed slave trading around the Black Sea.
Niccolo Machiavelli, in Book 8, Chapter 6 of his Storie Fiorentini, wrote, "This establishment presents an instance of what in all the republics, either described or imagined by philosophers, has never been thought of, exhibiting within the same community and among the same citizens liberty and tyranny, integrity and corruption, justice and injustice. For this establishment preserves in the city many ancient and venerable customs, and should it happen, as in time it easily may, that the San Giorgio shall have possession of the whole city, the Republic will become more distinguished than that of Venice." So what is Machiavelli saying here? He is talking about a culture count with the establishment, San Giorgio, on one side, and as Genoa was of course Catholic, it appears Christian values on the other. This antipathy has its origins in the ancient and venerable customs he speaks of, which must be the customs of the Radhanites. Characteristically tongue-in-cheek, Machiavelli then says that if the bank wins, it will outstrip Venice, where one assumes a similar contest was afoot.
Curiously, for the Freemasons' fixation with America, Christopher Columbus was a Genoan whose expedition to the Americas was financed by the San Giorgio Bank, which was looking for a way around Arab and Mongol taxes. The Genoan involvement in the slave trade is the most telling link with the Radhanites. As Cordoba related, one of the principal commodities the Radhanites traded was slaves. The very word slave is derived from the word Slav, as it was the piteous and prettier Slavic children who survived the Mongol devastation of Russia, who were bundled up and sold off to Arab harems. San Giorgio's Black Sea base was a port called Kaffa, which housed Europe's biggest slave market and is the origin of the term black market. It is also the origin of the word kafir. This was the term used by the Radhanite slave traders, who later followed the Portuguese exploration of Africa, and the word was continued to be used by the Dutch, who succeeded them.
The notion that the word kafir derives from the Arabic word kafir is either laziness or disinformation. The Arabic word denotes a person who has read the Quran but rejects it. Unsurprisingly, the Arabs have a word for slave, abd. To come back to Scott's work, I disagree that the Templars just happened upon ancient knowledge. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, in politics, nothing happens by accident. I think that the Templars were a proxy organisation made up of French regal contenders and their Jewish banksters, who had their own agenda, which was a return to the Promised Land, tellingly advanced after both the First and Second Holocausts. It is this agenda which continues after the demise of the Templars and their reformation as the Freemasons, which Scott maps out in the Freemasons' role in the creation of the UN and the establishment of Israel.